Hello, good afternoon. My name is Catherine Kennedy. I'm the New South Wales Director at P2P, and it's 12:30 on Friday on the east coast of Australia, which means it's time for our regular live broadcast on Facebook and on YouTube. So thank you very much for joining us. Ordinarily, our Group Managing Director, Mark Smith, would be here for this broadcast, but he's enjoying a very well-deserved break today. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to mix things up a little bit and bring to you a bit of a trans-Tasman focused broadcast today. So to help with that, I'm joined by Shannon Barlow, who's the Managing Director of Recruitment in New Zealand, which is a People-to-People sister company. Also Annie O'Keefe, who's a talentologist with us in Frog, at Frog in New Zealand, and Colleen Deere from the Sydney legal team. She's a senior consultant with us here. So thank you for joining us, everybody. So what are we going to do today? Well, I thought that Shannon and I could share with you just a little bit of an overview of what we're seeing across the Australian and New Zealand markets. There's been some interesting numbers that have come out in recent weeks, and we thought we could just give you a little bit of an overview of that. We've also got a really exciting project that the Frog team is working on. I think there's multiple positions across the country, so Annie can take us through what that is all about, and then Colleen's got a great opportunity from the Sydney legal team to talk to us about as well. So as always, if you have any questions or comments as the broadcast goes on, please do add them live. We can see them live, and we'll certainly do our best to respond, and we really appreciate your participation as well. So let's get into it with our it's a market wrap up that we'll start with. Great. Okay. So Shannon, I think last week you were watching along, and you made a comment as Mark was going through the unemployment rates here for Australia, and you made the comment that the unemployment rate in New Zealand had actually declined, which just seems a little bit incongruent in the situation that we're in. So we thought we'd get you on and get you to give your perspective as to what's happening in New Zealand at the moment. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so when I commented on the post there, wasn't quite sure that it would mean I'd get roped into this week. No, it's definitely, it was kind of mind-boggling when the results came out with the unemployment rate to drop back to, it was actually a record low that we saw in the December 2019 quarter of 4.0%. So it made you think, well, we know New Zealand's doing pretty well at managing COVID, but I didn't think we were doing quite that well. But you really do need to take it with a grain of salt. So the way that the unemployment rate, or the definition of being unemployed comes across, doesn't count people who are not looking for work. So that could include, and remember that period of that quarter, the June quarter, includes when we were in lockdown. So people who were in, if they were in isolation, or even just going through lockdown and may have been waiting to see how long it went for and weren't looking for work at that time, weren't counted. So you need to look at perhaps things like participation rates and underutilisation as well to get a more realistic measure, but it is still really promising that we've been able to keep unemployment down so low. So with you can see on the screen there the increase in the number of people who took up the job seeker benefit. So you can see that clear effect of the COVID crisis there. And our underutilisation did increase. So that includes people who may have wanted to work but were unable to, as well as those people who had their hours reduced over this time, so that the actual hours worked showed a significant decrease as well. Other things that go into that is also the increase of temp and contract work. So for us, we experienced a real resiliency in temp and contract work over this time, which has been excellent. And there's also been shorter term opportunities come up when, businesses, once they were able to get back into business, needed those hands on deck to be able to keep things running, but it might have been for shorter periods. Yeah, I think definitely the real test is going to be once those measures such as the wage subsidy, once those end, that will be the real test of the new normal. But there. How about with you in Australia, Kath?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I guess in contrast to New Zealand, the unemployment rate actually increased here and this is month on month, so from June to July. And I think this might have been a graph that was shared last week, but just to show everybody that fairly sobering image, you can see the huge peak in 2020, and it's actually the highest unemployment rate we've had in Australia in 22 years. So that's not a milestone that we're happy to have met by any stretch. And I think it's also 1 million people unemployed for the first time. So the unemployment rate did increase. I think it is worth noting, though, that the participation rate in Australia increased by a greater proportion. So the unemployment rate rose by 0.1%, but the participation rate actually went up by 0.6%. So to your point around participation, it's really about the number of people who want to be in the workforce. And that lifting for us here in Australia, there could be a couple of factors. One of them absolutely could be a health consideration, and that people are able to work again, particularly in some of the locations where there's not as many COVID restrictions and there's not as many COVID cases. And I think we've definitely seen a correlation between, the impact of COVID from a health perspective and confidence and hiring activity. But it could also be, so there's definitely a health element, but I think the participation rate increasing is also potentially an indication of and it's very cautious, but a very cautious optimism that there's a little bit of momentum building. And that's certainly been the experience of as I said, the locations where there's not so much of a health impact from COVID anymore and there's minimal or no restrictions, we're certainly seeing that it's just a bit busier. So I spoke to both Peter over in South Australia, our director over there, and Ben up in Queensland over the last couple of days. And they both said that their experience at the front line has been that things are, there's a bit more optimism, there's a little bit more activity happening, and I think that participation rate can be an indication of that sort of confidence as well. So, I think it's also been reflected in the internet vacancy index numbers that were released this week. So if you want to pop the next slide up there, Jaden, this shows that the employment market, it is improving. It's very, very slow and it's from a very low base. But in all of the states across Australia, with the exception of Victoria, and we can sort of understand why that would have happened, more jobs were advertised on the internet in July than were in June. So there is, as I said, it's nowhere near a normal market. We certainly, it's nowhere near where we would want it to be, but there does seem to be just a little bit of a sense that things are improving slightly, and there's a little bit more positivity in the market there as well. But if you look at this slide, you can see whilst there's been some positive change month on month, contrasting year on year, it's really pretty dramatic. So particularly in New South Wales and Victoria, where the COVID cases have been, been at their highest and the impact and the restrictions have been greatest, we're looking at 25 to 40% drops year on year in jobs being advertised. So it's still a tough market. It's definitely still a tough market here in Australia, but there are some pockets of there's some pockets that we're looking to that are looking reasonably positive, I think. And I don't know what the experience in New Zealand has been, but one of the things that we're definitely still experiencing here in Australia is the impact of candidate hesitancy. So there's both a demand problem in terms of jobs being advertised. There's not as many as we would like, but from an availability of candidates, there is a hesitation for people to leave their existing employer and join a new employer. And I think I've seen this every week for the last couple of weeks. And there was one only the other day that I heard one of our consultants speaking to a candidate, had a job offer. It was a higher salary. It was a great company that was going to have some long-term opportunities for them. And I don't actually know how that situation resolved, but there really was some hesitation from the candidate to I guess, leave the devil you know. So that's certainly a trend that we're continuing to see as well. But look, the market is okay. It's okay. It's not getting worse, but we're only very incrementally, starting to come out of what was a really pretty terrible time through April, May, and June to a lesser extent. What about the impact of the increased restrictions for you in New Zealand? I know it's been a week or so that in Auckland you're all back at home and you've got those restrictions. How's that played out over there?
Yeah, so I think I should have got onto this presentation a bit earlier while we were still riding the wave of, or wave's probably not the right word, but of having an amazing response and feeling like things were back to normal in terms of everyday life. Frog Recruitment had put out a survey where we asked people, if Kiwis, if they felt better prepared in the case that if we went into a second lockdown. And actually, just with its timing had it, we released the results that showed that 77% did feel better prepared if we had to go into a second lockdown. And then the very next day, Auckland had to go into a second lockdown, and those restrictions were increased for the rest of the nation. So unfortunate there, but I think it really highlighted that now is that time to put it to the test as well. And I think we have shown that we have been better prepared. So don't get me wrong, it's not that but there's still that anxiety and that kind of shock initially, and that disappointment that we were in that situation again. But very quickly that moved into action. So, people working really quickly to be able to get themselves set up again to work from home full time if they were able to, and to mobilise their teams to be able to go, right, we know what we're doing, let's just get on with that. So, it has been good to see, and I think that this time around, it's for businesses that are still able to operate. It's felt more like a hiccup, not a real heart attack for businesses. So hopefully, with any luck, we'll have the announcement on Monday. But hopefully, it will be just the 2 weeks, and then we can start to get back to those levels again. But your experience with that candidate hesitancy is definitely something that we have started to see, even in this short 2 week period. So, just that that knock to the confidence of feeling like it's the devil or just uncertainty about future and wanting to stay with current employers has had an impact. But on a positive note, most of the vacancies that we're working on, it hasn't had that much of an impact. So clients have been motivated to continue the process and keep that moving along. So whether that meant shifting to video interviews instead of face-to-face, we've been able to keep that moving. And we've even seen an increase in some new job orders as well, which is really promising.
Yeah, interesting. I think it just shows how, that link between the health situation and the sort of business confidence, how interlinked that is. And I think it's one of the things that makes this particular recession and this particular downturn most difficult to navigate and predict, because it's such a, it's so tenuous really based on what's happening from a health perspective, has such a direct impact on that. And it really comes down to confidence. I think, so I'm based in New South Wales, so fortunately I'm not in Victoria and I'm not in the stage 4 lockdown that they're needing to adhere to at the moment. But I did speak to a couple of the guys in the Victorian team this morning just to sort of see what the experience had been in terms of hiring activity, particularly in that context. And look, the feedback from them is that naturally, I think a lot of employers are really trying to focus on the well-being and looking after their existing staff. You know, I think this is having an impact on everybody just as individuals, and I think that obligation for employers to make sure that people are okay, that they're engaged, that they're connected. So that's really been the primary focus. So I think it's probably meant that there's just not really an eye to sort of new hiring or, you know, things that might have been sort of in, you know, on the back burner are certainly not coming to the fore. However, there is certainly activity still happening around essential services. So the guys said that health, energy and manufacturing, they've still been relatively busy compared to some of the other sectors. And an interesting trend that seems to be coming up in Victoria is more of a tendency to temporary engagement. So that might be reflective of it just being so uncertain, is that, you know, organisations, they need the support, they need the help, but they're just not sure what the next, you know, let alone the next month, let alone quarter or year is going to look like. So engaging people on a temporary basis with a view to a permanent position down the track. So that's interesting to see as well. Well, that's a bit of a snapshot from Shannon and I. I thought what we might do now, Shannon, if you wanted to speak with Annie about the opportunities that the Frog team are working on across the country, I think. So you're probably best equipped to talk to her about that, given you're both over there in New Zealand.
Yes, so we've had a really exciting opportunity come through over the last week or so. So I'll bring Annie on to talk more through that. But as I said, it is great to be able to see this movement and that it's been a slight pause and not a stop in its tracks. And yeah, there's some exciting opportunities going forward.
Yeah, so we have been working on some really interesting opportunities. So this is in the early childhood sector. I'm currently working on about 4 roles, and this is right throughout New Zealand. So team leaders, centre managers, head teachers, and early childhood teachers. So this is right across New Zealand, predominantly in Auckland. There's also Wellington, Christchurch. I think we have one in Hokitika, one in Hamilton. So it's spread all around, which is great. And this is all really due to growth in the industry. So the organisation is a really supportive organisation. Their vision really is to create centres that children love to be at, and that children want parents want their children to be there. They are very supportive, and I guess I can give a good example around that, in that during the COVID period, they have paid their employees 100% of their salary. So I think that's really reflective of how they feel about their staff. So just looking at the roles, so early childhood teachers, you do need to be qualified. With the early childhood teachers, they will look at part-time and full-time, so they're really flexible there. They do ideally want experience, but they will look at grads. And if you are a new grad, one of the benefits they also offer is $1,150, I think it is, for as a signing on sort of incentive. Then you've got team leaders and head teachers, and these are full-time roles because they really are based around leadership. And so what they focus on there is, yes, you need to be registered again, and what you're focusing on there is relationships, mentoring, and leadership. So ideally, they would like people with that experience, but they are flexible, because if you feel that you have that potential and it's time for you to step up, then they absolutely will look at you. And then we also have centre managers. And again, for the centre managers, you have to be registered, ideally in a centre manager role. But if you feel like it is time again to step up into that role and you've got that broad set of skills, absolutely would look at you in terms of, as long as you can clarify that potential. Just in terms of benefits for the organisation, they actually offer a lot of benefits. They have a really strong commitment in terms of professional development and really provide a clear pathway in terms of moving up. What else? I'm just trying to think. They also have really competitive salaries. They have birthday days off. They also have childcare fees at the centres, so that's subsidised. discounted medical insurance. There's actually a lot of benefits there. And as well, it is really, a supportive environment that really cares about their people. Some really exciting opportunities.
Oh, that's excellent. What should people do with, so I see we've got the link there to our vacancies on the Frog website, which is great. And there will be different advertisements for some of the main locations. What about if there's someone who's interested in potentially joining the organisation but isn't in one of those listed locations?
I would love to talk to them. Opportunities do come up, and there's a lot of internal progression due to their sort of career pathways and encouraging them to, move them up in the organisation. So if there wasn't anything available right now, I'd absolutely love to talk to them and sort of, just we could sort of talk about what opportunities will be coming up in the future.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah.
And speaking of timing there, are these roles immediately available, planned for the next term, or?
A lot of these are available now just due to growth. So absolutely keen to talk to people with experience if they're keen.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's thanks for that, Annie, and let's go back over to Sydney and see what opportunities they have.
I've just been monitoring the comments here, and there is a comment from Bianca Luck, and she wants to have a shout out to all of her family in New Zealand to please spread the word. So hopefully Bianca's extended family might be able to share some potential candidates for you. But we're here and we're joined by Colleen from the Sydney legal team. So thanks for joining us, Colleen. And I know, because I am in Sydney and I'm definitely across this part of the market, that you've been pretty busy in the legal team over the last couple of weeks, which has been really good to see.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've actually we've gotten a lot busier in the last, I would say, probably for the month of August. The positions that we're working on are very varied across my desk. So I look after the permanent positions, but also across the team. We've been working on positions such as IT help desk, business development positions, an operations manager role, which is one I'd like to talk a bit further about. So definitely we've gotten a lot busier. And I know we've been on these broadcasts quite a few times over the last few weeks as a team. And we always say insurance has been busy, family law is really, really busy. So there's those certain areas which we're really experiencing. But also I think just to echo with the candidate hesitancy piece, we've seen that as well. One of our colleagues was working on a position where the client had offered the role a couple of times, but the candidates were just really, really hesitant in, exactly what you said, moving on. So I think that's something that we've noticed, but certainly the law firms are moving quickly, which is good.
Yeah, I think with the candidate hesitancy piece, I think it can sometimes mean that there's a bit of a disconnect between expectations of an employer, because, if you see these numbers, you see the worst unemployment rate in 22 years, naturally, you might think it's going to be easy for me to get good talent. There's going to be great people around, perhaps salaries are maybe not going to be what they were. So I think there can be that perception. But as you would know, the reality is to get the really great candidates can almost be more difficult in this sort of a market when there's not quite the same sort of confidence to make a move. So it's an interesting trying to get that balance right. Definitely. But tell us about this operations manager role that you're working.
Yes, so it is. So it's a permanent full-time position. It is, you could call it a practice manager, an office manager, and it's working for an international firm in the CBD. So having that global exposure will definitely be very attractive to be considered. They're a top-tier firm located in the heart of the CBD. So they've got amazing views, fabulous harbour views. And ideally what we're looking for is if you have worked as an office manager or an operations manager in a law firm, that is ideal. But we are also looking at candidates who have come from a professional services background. And as I said, because of the time zones, somebody who is very comfortable in that area would be great. It's a very varied position. So you would be looking after facilities, IT. There is also that element of HR as well, looking after policies, procedures. If you're somebody who likes numbers, there's a bit of finance involved as well. So it's very, very varied. And it's a pretty unique opportunity, actually. So we're really excited to be working on it.
It sounds like a great one. Yeah. Do candidates need to bring any specific qualifications, or would it sort of just really be the experience that they're bringing?
Yeah, I think it's really the experience and bringing the kind of wealth of knowledge that you can to the firm. So if you've worked across somebody who's kind of like the go-to person, someone who wears many hats in a position, because it is obviously it is in Sydney, but you would be liaising with counterparts interstate as well. So in Sydney, being that operations office manager, somebody who has come from a very, very similar background, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Okay. And if people want to get in touch with you and find out more details about the role, I'm sure I think Jaden's just popped the link to the job advertisement down there, which is great. But if people are just generally, if they've got that legal support experience and they're open to making a move or to looking at new opportunities, they should reach out to you and the team.
Yes,
as well.
Absolutely. Yep. So you can click on the link, or even you'll find me on LinkedIn as well if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Colleen Deere. And then my direct line is 02-8270-9794.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Colleen. Just a reminder.
Thank you, Jeff.
No worries, no problem at all. Just a reminder to everyone if you're watching, you can set up via our website, I should say, there's job alerts that you can set up. So every time we have a position that we start working on, it will be advertised on our website. So you can get notified when those positions come up, and then you can reach out to the team directly. So in the comments, you'll find a couple of different things that would be relevant from the conversation today. And I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to watch this and to contribute. I just want to check if there's any questions that have come through whilst we've been talking. Look, there seems to be some interest in the role that Colleen's talked about, which is great. So a few comments, it's a great opportunity. People are pleased to hear that there's a little bit more activity in the Sydney market. So, and we're certainly very pleased to see that as well. So thanks again for watching us today. Please sign up to the job alerts, follow us on all of our social channels. I know a lot of the individual consultants are very active on social media, and certainly the People to People blog I would suggest is worth subscribing to. But that's really the end of the broadcast today, and thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back at 12:30 next Friday. Have a great weekend.